Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Wassalatu wassalamu ala khatam al-nabiyyin, amma ba'du fa'uz billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Rasulallah, wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Habiballah, As-salatu wassalamu alayka ya Nabiyallah, wa ala alika wa ashabika ya Nurallah. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من صلى علي واحدة صلى الله عليه عشرا أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. The Prophet of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم has stated, whoever so recites salat upon me once, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward him with 10 deeds. Imam Castellani rahimahullah, he commentates on this hadith sharif, stating that this increasing of reward, it is only upon the ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That in the previous nations, be it the nation of Sayyidina Musa, Sayyidina Isa, Sayyidina Dawood, Sayyidina Adam, while their ummatis will do one good deed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will only reward them with one good reward. However, well, it came to the best of nations, when it comes to our nation, the nation of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He increases the reward of those who just recite one durood upon the Zat of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Inshallah, today's Dars Hadith will be regarding Hadith number 5. This Hadith is regarding those things which are innovated in Islam. An Ummul Mu'minin Ummi Abdullah Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. So this hadith, it is narrated by the mother of believers, Sayyidatuna Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala anha. Sayyidatuna Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she was one of the blessed wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is stated by Imam Yahya Sharaf rahimahullah, Imam Nawawi, that she was the most beloved to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ba'da Khadijata radiyallahu ta'ala an. Meaning after Sayyidatuna Khadija radiyallahu ta'ala an, the first wife of the Prophet alayhi wasallam, the most beloved after this was Sayyidatuna Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala anha. It is stated regarding Sayyidatuna Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala an that she was fasih in her kalam, meaning she was very eloquent. She was the hafiz of the Quran, and she was a hafiz of many ahadith sharif. It is also stated that she left this apparent world at the age of 65 years of age. And Imam Yahya ibn Sharaf rahimahullah, Imam Nawawi, he states that she narrated over 1,000 ahadith sharif. So Sayyidatuna Aisha Siddiqa, she says, Qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam has stated, Man ahdasa fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu fahuwa raddun. That whoever so introduces in our matter, i.e. Islam, hadha ma laysa minhu, and it is not from it, fahuwa raddun, then it is rejected. And this hadith sharif, it is found in both Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih al-Muslim. In another narration, Sayyidatuna Aisha Siddiqa radiyallahu ta'ala anha, she states that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he has stated, Man amila amlan laysa alayhi amruna fahuwa raddun. That whoever so acts upon an action that we did not introduce, then that is rejected as well. Now, many people, they take this hadith sharif and they take it in the wrong way. That they say that whatever that the Prophet alayhi wasallam, he did not do, then we should not also do this as well. However, this is a misconception. Rather, what this hadith is telling us is those things which are not part of the religion, which do not benefit the religion, then those are rejected. So there is another hadith sharif, kullu bid'atin dalala, that every bid'ah is for misguidance. Many people, they use that hadith sharif over this hadith. Wa kullu dalalatin finnar, and every innovation and every misguidance is for the hellfire. So this word bid'ah, this is commonly used among the misguided sects. So today we'll dwell into what does bid'ah mean. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he states that bid'ah, this means literally an innovation, an addition, a new act, something which did not exist before, but now it exists. However, according to Sharia, bid'ah means those things which were not done by the Prophet ﷺ, the Sahaba and the Tabi'in, that those things which were not done, which were not practiced by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, these things, they can be good as well. So from this hadith, kullu bid'atin dalala, we know that the word kul, it means every. But in this hadith sharif, kul is in the meaning of ba'ad, meaning some. Imam Nawawi, he states that kul is not always used for kul. Every is not used for every. Sometimes the word kul, it can be used in the meaning of ba'ad, meaning it can be used in the meaning of some, of a portion, a group, a tiny bit. So in Arabic, this is known as minhul ba'ad, i.e. general. It's not a khas meaning, it is a general meaning. So it does not include everything, and it is not restricted to everything either. But how do we come to this conclusion? How did Imam Nawawi, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, Imam Abu Hanifa, all the great mashayikh of the past, how did they know that kul does not always mean every single thing? So we open up the Quran, and in the Quran we hear the ayah wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is powerful over everything. This is true, but it is true to a certain extent. Now we'll get into that a little bit later. So this word kul is used here again, wa huwa ala kulli, and he is powerful over everything. But does it mean everything, or is some things restricted by this word kul? The view of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah is that those things which do not befit the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, i.e. lying, deceitfulness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those are not part of his sifat. He does not need to be attributed with those things. So anything which is defecting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say that those things are not attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is powerful over everything, but only those things which are good. Those things which are bad, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is free from those things. So as humans, we are not free from lying, deceiving, cheating, committing zina, doing bad things. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is exempt from this. And that is the reason why the scholars of the past, they say that kul here, it does not mean inclusive. It means general. Another view of some people is that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they use this ayah, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all powerful. And they say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has the power to lie, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is powerful over everything. And we say, ma'azallah, this is kufr, this is haram. One cannot attribute this to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is a defect. Lying is a defect. Attributing lying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is kufr. So if they take this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is powerful over lying, then that book, the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says there is no doubt in this book. Possibly, according to their belief, that can mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran, it can be a lie. There is a possibility of that being a lie, according to them. According to us, we say that it can be never true. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he does not need these defects. He is free from defect. So another way that we know that Qul, it does not mean inclusive every single thing, is through a Hadith Sharif. This Hadith Sharif narrated by Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he says that I heard the Prophet alayhi wasallam state, Kullu aynin zani, that every eye is for fornication. Now this kul here again, it does not mean that kul including the prophets as well. Because if the prophets can commit zina, then that means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not created the prophets perfect. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has not created the prophets perfect, and He has not created them as mahsoom, free from sin, then that means that they can also lie as well. And this is a defect which we cannot attribute towards the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now if we take this hadith sharif, kullu aynin zani, and we take another hadith sharif, and this hadith sharif, it is narrated by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu ta'ala, he states that the Prophet alayhi wasalam, he stated that your Lord, He does not see you with one eye. Now as the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, we leave this kayfiyah up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Rasul. We do not question into this. But some misguided people, and this is written in their books, they state that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does not see you with one eye because He sees you with two eyes. Astaghfirullah, this is also kufr. This is attributing body parts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We cannot understand the kayfiyat, the modality of the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees. We cannot understand that. We cannot understand that is written in the Quran as well, that everything will be destroyed but Allah's face. We can't understand this. We cannot comprehend this into our aql. However, the misguided sects, what they do, they try to dwell into this. They try to get a natija from this. And they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a face like ours. But we say, ma'azallah, that is kufr, that is haram. We can never say this. So what the misguided people, they say in their books is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has two eyes. Now when we join this hadith, kullu aynin zani, and your Lord does not see you with one eye, then this, ma'azallah, this leads to a natija, leads to a result that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He also has eyes now according to your books, and every eye is for fornication. The natija that we get from it, the result we get from that is, ma'azallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from this thought, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He can commit zina. Astaghfirullah. So if one uses aql and they open the Quran Sharif, then they understand that this word kul, it does not mean inclusive, it's not restrictive to every single thing. Rather, it is amum, it is an arm word. It means some, a group. We know a group of people, they do commit zina. And that is fine, that is their sin. The kuffar, they do commit zina. That is another group. But as mu'min, as mu'minun, as mu'mineen, we do not commit this sin of zina. So now we understand that kullu bid'atin dalala wa kullu dalalatin finnar. This does not mean every single bid'ah is a misguidance. And every single bid'ah, every single misguidance is for the hellfire. We now understand from this, because of the word kul, it means some. So we translate this as some bid'ahs, they are for the hellfire. And due to this, we know that bid'ah, it is permissible. Because we look at other ahadith as well. So misguided sects, they will only look at this one hadith, kullu bid'atin dalala. But rather they do not understand there are many, many mutawatir ahadith, many mashhur ahadith, many sahih ahadith that state that bid'ah is permissible. Imam Muslim, rahimahullah, he states in his Sahih Muslim. Sahih Muslim, it is the third most authentic book. The first being the Quran Sharif, the second being Sahih al-Bukhari, and the third being Sahih al-Muslim. In Sahih al-Muslim, Imam Muslim, he states that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he has stated, Man sanna fil islami sannatan hasanatan falahu ajruha wa ajru min amaliha min ba'di min ghayri in yanqada min ajurihim shay'un. وَمَنْ سَنَّ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ سَنَّةً سَيِّئَةً كَانَ عَلَيْهِ وَزْرُهَا وَوُزُورَهَا مِنْ عَمَلِ بِهَا مِنْ بَعْدِهِ مِنْ غَيْرِ أَنْ يَنْقَضَ مِنْ أَوْزَارِهِمْ شَيْءٌ. So the translation of this is, whoever introduces a good practice in Islam. So the Prophet ﷺ, he's stating this himself. Whoever so brings a new thing into Islam, which is good, he will have its reward. He will be rewarded with that. And the reward of those who act upon it after him as well. For example, someone introduces the concept of milad. He will get the reward of that. But those people who act upon celebrating, upon commemorating the blessed birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he will get the reward from those people as well. But those people who commemorate the milad, their reward, it will not diminish in the slightest. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he states this, without diminishing their reward in the slightest. And whoever introduces a bad practice in Islam, he will bear its burden and the burden of those who act upon it after him, without diminishing their burden in the slightest. So those people who introduce a bad bid'ah, a bad act, which was not done by the Prophet ﷺ or the Sahaba or the Tabi'in or the Taba Tabi'in, then he will get the sin for that thing. And those people who act upon that bad thing he has introduced, he will also get the sin of that as well. So now we understand from this ahadith that there are two types of bid'ah as well. Those bid'ah which are good, a newly invented thing which is good, and a newly invented thing which is bad. So now we understand from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that there can be a good bid'ah and there can be a bad bid'ah. So learning from this, our intellects, this allows us to know that two types of bid'ah. And many of the Sunni scholars, the many scholars of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the past scholars as well, such as Imam Shafi rahimahullah. Imam Shafi rahimahullah, he also states there are two types of bid'ah. Bid'ah madmuna and bid'ah mazuma. Now Imam Shafi rahimahullah, no one can argue with Imam Shafi rahimahullah when it comes to kalam. Why? Because Imam Shafi rahimahullah, he was the most advanced in taking out meanings of words. Like the Ahnaf, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, Imam Azam, he was a master at fiqh. His speciality was fiqh, that he can take a hadith sharif and he can derive not one, not two, but many rulings from one ahadith. Or one Quran ayah, Imam Azam, Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, he can derive many rulings regarding this. However, Imam Shafi, he could also do this, but his speciality, his expertise was in deriving meanings from words. Imam Shafi rahimahullah, he says there are two types of bid'ah. Now, saying that Imam Shafi, he was confused regarding this is haram to say. Because there is ijma' upon the scholars of Islam. Imam Shafi'i, Imam Nawawi, Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, just a few to name from the Shafi school. When it comes to the Ahnaf, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani, Imam Zufar, they also state that bid'ah is of two types. Imam Malik from the Maliki school, Imam Ghazali rahimahullah, he was also a Maliki, he also states that bid'ah, there are two types. And when it comes to the Hanabila, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah, the founder of the Hanabila school of thought, Imam Rajab al-Hanbali rahimahullah, they also state that bid'ah is of two types. Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, he also states that bid'ah is of two types, good and bad. Imam Hajar al-Asqalani, let us look at the works of Imam Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah ta'ala alayhi. So Imam Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, he says bid'ah, this hadith kullu bid'atin dalala, this word kull, it does not mean every. And the people, they asked him, Imam Sahib, why does this not mean every? He says, if you look at the Quran Sharif, you open the Quran Sharif, we hear this ayah that kullu nafsin za'iqat al-maut, that every soul shall taste death. He says, if you open Surah Ma'idah, and in this ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Isa ibn Maryam, Sayyidina Isa alayhi wasalam, he is talking to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're having a conversation. And he says in this conversation, it is written in the Quran, that Sayyidina Isa alayhi wasalam, he says, تَعْلَمْ مَا فِي نَفْسِي وَلَا أَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نَفْسِكَ. That you know what is in my nafs, you know what is in my soul. وَلَا أَعْلَمُ مَا فِي نَفْسِكَ. But I do not know what is in your soul. Now Sayyidina Isa alayhi wasalam, he is stating that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has a nafs. Now, when you join these two ayahs together, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ زَائِكَةُ الْمَوْتِ, that every soul shall taste death. And then this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has a soul. Does that mean, ma'azallah, astaghfirullah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his soul will also pass away? His soul shall taste death. Whoever states this, this will be regarded as kufr. And one will be taken out of the folds of Islam with this ayah as well. So Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, who is a hujjah in Islam, he also states that the word kul, this is the meaning of ba'ad. It does not mean every single thing. So another person, he comes to Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, and he asks him, how many types of bid'ah are there? Ma aqsamuhu bid'ah. What are the types of bid'ah? Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he states, al-bid'atu asluha ma ahadati ala ghayra misli sabiq. That bid'ah in its origin, it means something newly invented without a prior example. Wa fi shar'i fi muqabalati sunnati fatakuna madhumatan. That in Islamic law, in Sharia, it is used in contrast to the Sunnah. Hence, fatakuna madhumatan, that sometimes this can be madhuma, it can be a bad innovation, blameworthy. Wa tahqiqi, however, in reality, annaha in kanat mimma tanzariju tahta mustahsana. However, in reality, if it falls under something approved by the Sharia, فَهِيَ حَسَنَةٌ, then it is good. فَإِنْ كَانَتْ مِمَّا, and if it is تَنْتَرِجُ تَحْتَ مُسْتَقُبَهٍ فِي شَرْعِ فَهِيَ مُسْتَبْقَةٌ. But by Sharia, if it falls under something disapproved, then it is a sayyi'ah, then it is bad. وَإِلَّا, and if it is not good and if it is not bad, فَهِيَ مِنْ قِسْمٍ مُبَاحٍ, then this is regarded as mubah. Mubah means that you don't get reward for it and you don't get sin for it. But if you have a good intention behind something, then you will get reward for it. For example, eating is mubah. You don't get sawab by eating and you don't get guna by eating. Unless you eat something which is haram, then you will get sin from it. And you can get reward from eating if you make a good intention. An example is that by eating this food, I will gain strength and I will do the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then this will be regarded as food which is beneficial for you and that food which you will get reward for. Imam Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, he then states that bid'ah, it comes under types. Imam Ibn Hajar, he says that bid'ah, it comes under 4 types. Number 1 is wajibah. So the mushaf of the Quran, the compilation of the Quran Sharif, this is a bid'ah wajibah, meaning it is a good bid'ah. And then he says there is a mustahab bid'ah. Now this bid'ah is the Mawlid Sharif, commemorating and celebrating the birth of our master Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says printing books of ahadith, grading them sahih, da'if, mutawatir, etc., ahad. This is also a bid'ah which is mustahab. And he says there is a mubah bid'ah. This is the 3rd qism. Mubah. Mubah can mean, for example, is the speakers that we use in the masajid. This is also a bid'ah. Because in the past, there was no such thing as speaker system. This is a newly invented thing. And it is used in the religion to propagate Islam. this is mubah. And the last one, he says, this is a bid'ah which is haram. So that thing which the Prophet ﷺ did and he never did, and he forbade this as well. So this includes as-salah, introducing a new namaz. This will be haram. For example, in Zuhr we have 4 sunnata, 4 farz, 2 sunnahs and 2 nafal. If someone, he adds 3 witr to Zuhr, not as a qaza, as an ada, he says that this is my new Zuhr, then this will be haram for that person. So let's look at some bid'ahs which we take and the misguided people take as well. So the first one is the mushaf of the Quran. The Quran was compiled, but was it compiled by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It was not compiled by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rather, it was compiled by Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, Sayyidina Umar, and Sayyidina Usman Ghani radiyallahu ta'ala an. So the method of preservation of the Holy Quran was that when a new ayat will be revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then the Prophet alaihi wasallam and some Sahaba, they would memorize these ayats. So once the Quran was revealed in its entirety, these people who memorize ayat by ayat, they memorize the Quran in how it was revealed to the Prophet alayhi wasallam. So their first ayat will be Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi, that read by the command of your Lord. However, if you open the Musaf of the Quran today, the starting is the Surah Fatiha. So again, this is a bid'ah, because why don't we read the Quran the way that it was revealed upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? This is a bid'ah. Again, this Quran, it was not compiled into a book yet. After the wisal of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first Khalifa of the Muslims after Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala an. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, he participated in many battles. One battle was the battle of Yamama. In this battle, many of the Huffaz of the Quran, they were shaheed in this battle. Now Sayyidina Umar, he had this thought that maybe we need to compile the Quran into a book form. Because if we compile this Quran into a book form, then it will never be forgotten. Even if the Huffaz, they all pass away, this Quran, it will never be forgotten. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an, they went out to the Sahaba and they said, let's compile the Quran. But there was very strictness on how they would compile the Quran. So when the Sahaba, they would narrate an ayat, they had to have 2 witnesses also say that, yes, we heard this ayat from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So from this, the Quran, it was compiled into a book form. So after the passing of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala an, Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu ta'ala an, he appointed Zayd ibn Sabit to carry on doing these works. Now, this Mus'haf, it was now completed. So it was completed actually in the Dawr, in the Khalifa of Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu ta'ala an. There's a misconception that the Quran, it was compiled completely in the Dawr of Sayyidina Usman Ghani radiyallahu ta'ala an. But Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu ta'ala an, he only had 1 Mus'haf of this Quran. There was only 1 compilation of the Quran. In the Dawr of Sayyidina Usman Ghani radiyallahu ta'ala an, this is now when Islam has spread to Iraq, to Kufa, to Basra, to Egypt, to many lands. And the Quran, it was being distorted. So Sayyidina Usman Ghani radiyallahu ta'ala an, he took this Mus'haf from Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu ta'ala an's blessed house, and then he told the Sahaba to memorize this Quran and then to write the Quran again, word for word. And then this Quran, it was sent out to Kufa, it was sent out to Basra, to Egypt, to Iraq, to Iran, all the surrounding areas where Islam was propagated. Sayyidina Usman Ghani, that is why he is known as a compiler. But rather Sayyidina Usman Ghani radiallahu ta'ala an, he was the one who made it mashhoor among the people. So this is regarded as a bid'ah because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he never stated to compile the Quran into a book. Another bid'ah is the books of Ahadith. In Sahih al-Bukhari, in Sahih al-Muslim, in Sahih al-Ibn Hibban, Sahih al-Tirmizi, there is no words in Sahih al-Bukhari of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam stating, compile my sayings into a book. You will not find in Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih al-Bukhari. However, if you open Sahih al-Bukhari, then you will find that this is a good bid'ah because these are the sayings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Likewise, the celebrating, the commemoration of the Mawlid ala Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The Mawlid, literally, it means the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. What we do in the Mawlid is that we recite the Quran Sharif. We have a tilawat, which is not a bid'ah by any means. We recite not poetry in the praise of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, which is not a bid'ah because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he had a personal poet, Hassan bin Sabit radiallahu ta'ala an, the personal poet of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This is not a bid'ah. And then we talk about the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam to gain closeness to Rasulullah, to gain muhabbat towards Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This is not a bid'ah. And then we perform dhikr, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How can remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be a bid'ah? And then we recite salat salam. We send peace and blessings upon our master, the reason for our creation, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. That is also not a bid'ah. And lastly, we have a dua, which again, dua, it is not a bid'ah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he has stated that dua, it is the essence of a mu'min. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he states in the Hadith al-Qudsi that ask me and I will give you this. And in dua, the meaning of dua is supplication, which means to ask. Now we are fulfilling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's words. We are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives us when we ask him. So these two things, the Quran Sharif and Sahih al-Bukhari, the Ahadith books, even the misguided sects, they also know that this was not compiled, this was not stated by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So now they are saying that bid'ah, it is a pick and a choose. According to them, they are now picking and choosing what we want to call bid'ah and what we don't want to call bid'ah. Another way that the Quran is a bid'ah, if you look the Mus'haf of the Quran, you look at the Mus'haf of the Quran back in the early century of Rasulullah, in Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq and the companions, there was no such thing as tashkil. There was no such thing as harakat, zaba zir pesh, fatta kasra dhamma. No such thing. This was introduced by the Nahwis, by the people of Basra and the people of Kufa. So it will be made easy for the entire world to recite the Quran. The Quran Sharif that we read that has zabar, zir, pesh, two zabar, rukus, etc. This was not in the original Mus'haf, the original text of the Quran. So again, this is another bid'ah. So what are some bid'ahs that we also agree on, that the misguided sects, they also agree on? So we've been through the Mus'haf of the Quran, we've been through the harakat on the Quran, we've been on to the compilation of Ahadith books. Now we will move on to tafsir. The tafsir of the Quran, yes, many Sahaba, they knew the tafsir of the Quran, because of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Shan-e Nuzul. But nowhere does Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam state that teach the hidden meanings of the Quran. Because the Quran is not meant for every single person to understand. Because if everyone, even the misguided people, if they start to understand the Quran, then they would be more misguided. And those people who are upon haqq, upon the right path, then they will turn misguided as well. That is the reason why we have scholars. Scholars of Hadith, scholars of fiqh, scholars of balagha, scholars of mantiq, scholars of Quran, scholars of tafsir. Another bid'ah is Jamaat timings. In the dawr of Rasulullah, in the dawr of the Sahaba, the Tabi'een, the Taba Tabi'een, there was no such thing as a Salah timetable. It was only now in the recent past 100 years, we have introduced a Salah timetable. Why? So it is easy for the people. A misguided sect, they also have a timetable as well. So they can, what they do is they pick and choose upon what they want to act upon and what bid'ahs they want to act upon. So the question arises, do they take kullu bid'atin dalala completely, or do they also take out meanings which benefit them? Last three, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he introduced something which we all follow. The 30 days in Ramadan Sharif. We are all blessed to stand in the masjid, in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can listen to the entire Quran Sharif by the Imam Sahib, the full 30 days. This is also a bid'ah. Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he introduced this into his dawr. The second to last one, Salatul Wuzu. The namaz after performing wuzu. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he did not perform Salatul Wuzu. However, a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, known as Bilal Habshi radiallahu ta'ala an, he was the first person to do Tahiyatul Wuzu, to perform namaz after completing wuzu. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in one narration, he says, what a good bid'ah this is. What a good innovation this is. If Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he's stating that this is a good bid'ah, then how can normal people have the audacity to say there's no such thing as a good bid'ah? And the last one is the minarets on the masajid. This also is a good bid'ah. It is beautifying the masjids. Back in the dawr of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, up until the Ottomans, there was no such thing as minarets. It was only until the Ottomans they came and they said that we should beautify our masajid. This was another bid'ah. And if you look in every single mosque now, you will see one nishani, that there are many beautiful minarets on the masjid. Ameen bi jahi Nabil Ameen sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He allow us to act upon the sayings of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam with ikhlas, and He allow us to not interpret ahadith by ourselves, but rather look into what the scholars have said. Ameen bi jahi Nabil Ameen sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.